All right, let's dive into the world of Spanish real estate. Today, we're going to tackle a topic that's essential for anyone dreaming of owning a slice of that Spanish sun: taxes.
Absolutely. While we all love to picture ourselves sipping sangria on a balcony overlooking the Mediterranean, the reality is that understanding the tax implications before you buy is crucial. It can really make the difference between a smooth, enjoyable experience and a financial headache.
Exactly. And that's why we're here. We're going to break it all down for you so you can make informed decisions and avoid any surprises down the road. Now, you've shared some fascinating sources with us, and one thing that really jumped out was this. In Spain, you actually pay a separate tax just for acquiring property. Can you believe that?
That's true. It's called the Impuesto sobre Adquisición de Inmuebles, or ICI for short. Imagine you find that perfect beachfront villa, and then boom, you realize you need another 10% on top of the price tag just to close the deal. That's the ICI.
Wow. Okay, so that's a serious chunk of change right off the bat. 6 to 10%, that's a lot. But before we get too deep into the ISAI, let's just zoom out for a sec. Can you give us a quick overview of the two main categories of Spanish real estate taxes?
Absolutely. We have direct taxes and indirect taxes. Direct taxes are those that hit you, the owner, directly. Think of it like property taxes. You might be familiar with those in other countries. In Spain, it's called Impuesto Prudal.
Okay, so those come straight out of your pocket as the owner. What about indirect taxes? How do those work?
Indirect taxes are levied on the transaction itself, the act of buying or selling the property. And the ISAI, which we just talked about, that's a prime example of an indirect tax. It's a percentage of the property value that you pay when you acquire the property.
So the ISAI, it's kind of like a sales tax, but just for real estate.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. And to make things even more interesting, the exact ISAI rate varies depending on the region you're buying in. For example, in Andalusia, right now it's 8%, while in the Canary Islands, it's a bit lower at 6.5%.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference. Why is there such a discrepancy between regions? Does it have something to do with the cost of living or maybe the popularity of certain areas?
That's a great question. And it's definitely something you would want to research further when you're zeroing in on a location. Regional governments have some autonomy in setting these rates, and various factors come into play, from economic development goals to the overall tax structure of the region.
So location plays a role. Okay, got it. Now, our sources also mentioned something called notary fees, and they seem to be a pretty big part of the buying process.
Yeah.
What exactly are those all about?
Yes, notary fees, often overlooked by buyers, but trust me, they can add up surprisingly fast. In Spain, you need a notary to handle many aspects of the property transaction. They review the property, prepare the deeds, register the property, obtain all sorts of certifications, basically. They make sure everything is legally sound and above board.
So it's not just one fee, but a whole series of fees for all those different services.
Exactly. And here's the thing. These fees are often calculated as a percentage of the total purchase price. So the more expensive the property, the higher the notary fees.
Oh, I see. That makes sense, but it also sounds like it could be a real budget buster. If you're not careful, these fees could really sneak up on you.
You're absolutely right. It's crucial to factor those notary fees into your budget right from the beginning. A good rule of thumb is to set aside around 1–2% of the property value for these fees, but it's always best to get a specific estimate from a notary in the area you're considering.
Okay, 1–2%, good to know. So we've got that hefty ICI and we've got the notary fees on our radar. What other taxes should we be aware of during the buying process?
Well, there's one you might be familiar with, at least the concept, VAT, or value-added tax. You probably know it as sales tax.
Wait a minute, I thought VAT was only for goods, not real estate.
It's a common misconception. In Spain, VAT does apply to certain types of real estate, specifically new properties and undeveloped land. So if you're buying a brand new apartment right from a developer or purchasing land to build on, you'll need to factor in VAT. It's called Impuesto al Valor Agregado in Spanish.
Interesting. So if I were to buy a charming old finca in a historic village, no VAT.
You got it. Used property is exempt. But here's another twist. Even with VAT, there can be exemptions and benefits. For example, sometimes primary residences might be exempt from VAT. Or you might find government programs offering VAT discounts for specific properties or buyers.
Wow, this is getting complex. It sounds like there's a lot to keep track of.
It definitely pays to do your research and really understand all the nuances. But don't worry, we'll cover all the details.
Okay, that's good to hear. So we've got the ISAI, notary fees, VAT for new properties.
Yeah.
what else is lurking in this Spanish real estate tax jungle?
Well, there's also stamp duty, or impuesto de timbres y estampillas in Spanish. It might seem like a small thing, but it's still an important part of the process.
Stamp duty? That sounds positively old-fashioned. Do you have to go out and buy physical stamps and actually stick them on documents?
Believe it or not, that's exactly what you do. It's a tax levied on important purchase documents, and you pay it by purchasing stamps. You get them from a tobacco shop or authorized vendor, and then, you physically stick them on documents like deeds and contracts. And here's why you don't want to forget it. These documents aren't legally valid without that stamp.
Wow. So you're basically paying for the privilege of having your documents officially stamped. It feels like we're going back in time.
It might seem archaic, but it's still very much a part of the system in Spain. And while the cost of the stamps themselves might not be a huge amount, it's an expense you need to be aware of to avoid any legal issues later on.
Okay, noted. So we've covered the ISAI, notary fees, VAT for new properties, and the stamp duty thing. It sounds like buying property in Spain comes with a lot of upfront taxes. But what about the ongoing taxes? What should we be prepared for once we actually own the property?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll definitely dive into in the next part of our deep dive. Because the tax journey doesn't end when you sign on the dotted line. There are definitely ongoing taxes to consider, and understanding them is essential for enjoying your Spanish property without any financial surprises. So you've paid your stamp duty, you've got those documents officially stamped, but the tax journey doesn't end there. Now we need to talk about property tax, something you'll need to be aware of as a homeowner in Spain.
Ah, property tax. That familiar friend or perhaps foe for homeowners everywhere. It's like that recurring subscription you can never quite cancel. So what's the Spanish version of property tax all about?
In Spain, it's called impuesto predial, and it's a recurring obligation for all property owners. Think of it like the property taxes you're probably used to.
Okay, so same concept, different name. What's it based on? Is it like a flat fee or does it depend on the property's value?
It's calculated based on the property's cadastral value. Basically, the assessed value determined by the local authorities.
Cadastral value, that's a new one. What determines this cadastral value? Is it just the size, or do other things factor in?
It's a key point to understand because this cadastral value has a direct impact on your tax burden. Factors like location, size, the age of the property, even things like the quality of construction can play a role.
So it's not just about the square footage. They really go in depth into the property's characteristics. So I guess that means keeping your property in good shape could affect your tax bill.
That's a great observation. It's definitely something to keep in mind. Neglecting maintenance could lead to a lower cadastral value and potentially higher taxes in the long run. So those home improvement projects might not just be about aesthetics. They could have tax implications as well.
Interesting. So how often do you have to pay this impuesto predial? Is it yearly, or are we talking more frequent installments?
The frequency can vary depending on the region. Could be annually, semi-annually, or even quarterly.
And just to be clear, if you miss a payment, there are penalties, right?
Absolutely. Timely payment is crucial to avoid any late fees or penalties. The Spanish tax authorities are pretty strict about deadlines.
Makes sense. Now, on a more positive note, how are these payments actually made? Do you have to, mail in a check, or has Spain entered the digital age?
Fortunately, Spain has a pretty modern and efficient tax collection system. Most payments can be made online, through bank transfers, or even in person at tax offices.
So no need to worry about lost mail or frantic last-minute trips to the post office. That's a relief. Sounds pretty user-friendly on the payment side.
It is. And they usually give you clear instructions and deadlines for each payment. As long as you're organized and you meet those deadlines, you shouldn't have any major issues.
Okay, great. So we've got the ISAI, the Impuesto sobre Adquisición de Inmuebles, which is that big tax on acquiring the property. And we've talked about notary fees, VAT for new properties, the stamp duty, and this ongoing Impuesto predial or property tax. Anything else we need to be aware of in terms of Spanish real estate taxes?
There's one more that's particularly important if you decide to sell your property. Capital gains tax. In Spain, it's officially known as Impuesto sobre la Renta, or ISR for short.
Capital gains tax, right. That's where you pay tax on the profit you make when you sell.
Exactly. And it applies to real estate as well. So when you sell a property in Spain, you'll need to calculate the capital gain. That's basically the difference between what you sell it for and what you originally paid for it, minus any allowable expenses.
So if you buy a property for, say, 200,000 FI and then sell it later for 300,000, you'd have a capital gain of 100,000. And that 100,000 would be subject to this capital gains tax.
Exactly. But here's an interesting thing. The Spanish tax system often has certain deductions and allowances that can potentially reduce your capital gains tax liability.
Ooh, deductions and allowances. Those are words I like to hear when it comes to taxes. What kind of things might qualify for deduction?
Well, things like renovation costs, certain legal fees, or even energy efficiency upgrades you've made to the property, those might be deductible. It's definitely worth checking these options with a tax advisor to see how you can possibly lower that tax burden when you sell.
Okay, so that's good news for sellers. What about buyers? Does capital gains tax affect them in any way?
It can, actually.
Mm.
In some cases, like if you're buying a new property from a developer, you, as the buyer, are legally required to withhold a portion of the seller's capital gains tax and pay it directly to the tax authorities. It's called retención de ISR.
So the buyer becomes kind of a temporary tax collector for the government. That's interesting. What's the logic behind that?
It's basically a way to try to prevent tax evasion and make sure that that capital gains tax gets paid.
Okay, it makes sense. Keep everyone honest. So we've covered ISI, impuesto predial, capital gains tax. Anything else we've missed? Any hidden gems in this Spanish tax system that our listeners should know about?
While we've covered the main points, Spanish tax law, like any legal system, can change. There can be new regulations or exemptions, so it's always a good idea to stay updated and maybe consult with a tax professional for the latest information.
Right, tax laws are about as constant as the weather sometimes. Good reminder to stay informed. Speaking of being informed, we've talked a lot about all these taxes, but what about the practical side of things? Let's say our listener's ready to buy property in Spain. What are some practical steps to navigate this whole tax situation? What advice would you give them?
The most important thing is, don't go it alone. Seek professional guidance from a tax advisor who specializes in Spanish real estate. They can help you navigate all those ins and outs, make sure you're taking advantage of any deductions or exemptions you might be eligible for, and make sure you're filing everything correctly and on time.
Find a good tax guide to lead you through it all. Makes sense. But let's say someone is still just exploring the idea of buying. What's their first step?
Research, research, research. Gather as much information as you can about the types of properties you're interested in, the area you're looking at, your own personal financial situation. Don't just fall in love with a villa and assume everything else will work out.
Less love at first sight and more due diligence when it comes to Spanish real estate. But how do you even research something as complex as the Spanish tax system? Where do you start?
There are some great online resources out there, but I'd also recommend reaching out to real estate agencies in the areas you're interested in. They often have experts or can connect you with tax advisors who can provide personalized guidance.
So start with some online research, talk to agents, and find yourself a tax advisor who can speak your language.
Got it. Now, there must be tons of tax advisors specializing in Spanish real estate. Any tips on finding a reliable one?
Word of mouth and referrals are always a great starting point. Ask around in your network, see if anyone has experience buying property in Spain, and if they can recommend someone trustworthy. And if you're starting from scratch, there are always online resources and professional organizations. But as with anything online, got to do your research.
Absolutely. Check their credentials, their experience, look for client reviews. Make sure you feel good about their expertise before you trust them with your finances. You don't want to just trust anyone with your Spanish real estate dreams.
Right. It's like choosing a doctor. You want someone qualified. Now, we've talked a lot about seeking professional advice, and that's clearly important. But beyond finding the right experts, are there any practical things our listener can do to make this tax journey go more smoothly?
One of the most important things is stay organized. Keep really good records of all your property documents, receipts, any correspondence with the tax authorities. That'll be really helpful when it comes time to file your taxes or if you ever get audited.
Right. A little organization up front can save a lot of headaches later on. What about communication? How can our listener make sure they're staying on top of things and communicating well with the Spanish tax authorities?
That's a great point. If you're not fluent in Spanish, think about getting a translator or interpreter to help you. Even if you have a tax advisor, staying informed and asking questions is always a good idea.
Don't be afraid to be proactive. Now, on the topic of staying on top of things, what about deadlines? Missing those can lead to all sorts of penalties and stress. Any advice on avoiding that?
Absolutely. Get familiar with the specific deadlines that apply to you. Mark them on your calendar, set reminders, make it a priority to file and pay on time.
So time management is key in the Spanish real estate adventure. Sounds like navigating the Spanish real estate tax system is a mix of research, expert guidance, and personal organization.
You got it. Buying property in Spain can be an amazing experience, But it's essential to go into it with your eyes wide open, understanding the financial and tax side of things. By doing your research, getting expert advice, and staying organized, you can navigate the process with confidence and enjoy the rewards of owning a piece of Spanish paradise.
And speaking of rewards, let's talk about something that often comes up with property taxes: deductions and exemptions. Tell me more.
Yes, deductions and exemptions. Those can be a nice relief, potentially lowering your tax burden and making owning property a bit easier on the wallet.
Okay, let's explore this world of tax breaks. What are some common deductions and exemptions for Spanish real estate?
That's a great question, and this is where things can get a bit tricky. The specific deductions and exemptions you can get really depend on a lot of things. The type of property, your residency status, whether it's a primary home or a second home, even your age sometimes.
So it's not one size fits all.
Definitely not. Spanish tax law is very specific with different rules for each deduction and exemption. This is where getting expert advice can be super helpful.
Okay, so let's break down some of the most common ones, starting with deductions. What are some typical deductions property owners might be eligible for?
One common one is for mortgage interest payments. If you've got a mortgage, you can usually deduct a portion of the interest you pay from your taxable income.
That's a nice perk. What about other expenses, things related to the property? Can those be deducted too?
Yeah, often there are deductions for certain property expenses, things like property taxes, insurance, maybe even renovation or repair costs under certain conditions.
Makes sense. Like deducting business expenses if you're self-employed, you're offsetting the costs of owning the property.
Exactly. The Spanish tax system recognizes that owning property has costs, and these deductions can help.
Okay, deductions covered. Now what about exemptions? What are some common situations where owners might be exempt from some of these Spanish real estate taxes?
One well-known exemption is for first-time home buyers. In many parts of Spain, first-time buyers get a reduced rate or even a full exemption from the property transfer tax, which, as we discussed earlier, can be a big expense.
That's a great incentive. Any other exemptions based on, say, personal circumstances?
Yes, there are often exemptions or reductions for seniors, people with disabilities, or people with lower incomes. The idea is to make owning a home more accessible.
It's good that the tax system considers different situations and tries to offer some help where needed.
Absolutely. The Spanish government knows housing affordability is important, and they've put these exemptions in place to support certain people.
Okay, so we've got deductions for mortgage interest, property expenses, exemptions for first-time buyers, seniors, special circumstances. Anything else to be aware of in the world of tax breaks?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, things can change. Spanish tax law evolves, so it's always a good idea to stay updated on any new deductions or exemptions. And of course, talking to a tax advisor is key to make sure you're taking advantage of everything you're entitled to.
Right. It's like using all those coupons you clip from the newspaper. Don't leave any money on the table. With good planning and expert guidance, you can potentially lower your tax bill and make owning property in Spain even more financially rewarding. Okay, so we've gone through all sorts of Spanish real estate taxes, from the initial purchase to ongoing costs and even those potential deductions and exemptions. But let's be honest, dealing with taxes can feel like a maze.
I agree. It's not always easy to figure out, especially in another country.
So let's give our listeners some practical tips. What are some key things to keep in mind to make this tax journey smoother?
One of the most important things is to be organized. Keep really good records of all your property documents, receipts, anything from the tax authorities. That'll be invaluable if you ever get audited.
Right. Being organized upfront can prevent headaches later. What about communication? How can our listeners stay on top of things and communicate well with those Spanish tax authorities?
If you don't speak Spanish fluently, definitely get a translator or interpreter to help you communicate. Even if you have a tax advisor, it's good to stay informed and ask questions yourself.
Don't be afraid to be proactive. Now, how about deadlines? We all know that missing those can lead to penalties and stress. Any tips for avoiding that?
For sure. Get to know those tax deadlines that apply to your situation. Put them on your calendar, set reminders, and make sure you file and pay on time.
It sounds like time management and a good calendar are essential tools in this adventure. Anything else our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, as we've been saying, professional advice is really important. Don't be afraid to reach out to a tax advisor who specializes in Spanish real estate. They can give you personalized guidance, answer your questions, and make sure you're navigating the system correctly.
Right. They're like your tax Sherpa guiding you through those mountains of Spanish tax laws. Okay, we've covered a lot here, different types of taxes, practical tips for staying organized, communication. But before we wrap up, let's step back and look at the bigger picture.
Sounds good. What do you have in mind?
I'm curious about how these property taxes in Spain fit into the whole economic scene. Are they high compared to other European countries? Do they play a big part in funding public services in Spain?
That's a great question, and it's one that people talk about a lot. Spanish property taxes are generally considered to be moderate compared to other countries in Europe, and not the highest, but not the lowest either.
So somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. And in terms of funding public services, they do play a pretty significant role in Spain's revenue. They help pay for things like education, healthcare, infrastructure, social programs.
So when you pay property taxes in Spain, you're not just fulfilling an obligation, you're also helping the community.
That's right. Property taxes are a vital part of how things work, making sure everyone contributes.
It's a good reminder that taxes, even though they can feel like a burden, are really an investment in our society.
I agree. They're essential for a functioning society, allowing governments to provide services and support.
Okay, so we've looked at the economic impact of those property taxes. Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about something more personal. The emotional side of owning property in Spain. We've covered finances and legal stuff, but what about the intangible benefits?
That's an important point. Owning property in Spain is often much more than just a financial thing. It's an emotional investment. It's a connection to a place, to a culture, a way of life.
Right. Those evening strolls along the beach, the smell of paella in the air, the flamenco music.
Exactly. It's about embracing the Spanish lifestyle.
And those moments, that sense of connection, that's priceless, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Those are the things that enrich our lives and make it all worthwhile.
So while those Spanish property taxes might require some effort, the rewards, both practical and emotional, can be truly special.
I couldn't agree more. Owning property in Spain can be a wonderful experience.
Sounds like it's important to balance those practical considerations with your heart's desires when making the decision.
Definitely. Finding that balance between your financial goals and your lifestyle aspirations is key.
Right. It's not just about the numbers. It's about picturing yourself on that sunny terrace, living the Spanish dream.
Exactly. And speaking of dreams, let's talk about something that comes up often with property in Spain. Investment growth.
Okay, investment mode activated. How's the Spanish real estate market doing these days? Good time to invest.
Well, as with any investment, there are always risks. The Spanish real estate market has had its good times and bad times, but generally it's considered a fairly stable and attractive market for investors.
So no guarantees, but a solid history.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. Things like location, type of property, and the overall market conditions all play a role in how much an investment might grow.
Location, location, location. We've all heard that one before. Are there any particular regions or types of properties that are hot right now?
Coastal areas, especially those that are popular with tourists, are always in demand. And big cities like Barcelona, Madrid, Valencia, they also attract a lot of investment because of their economies and cultural attractions.
So whether you want a beach villa or a stylish city apartment, Spain has you covered.
And beyond those, there's growing interest in things like holiday rentals, retirement homes, and even rural properties for people looking for a more peaceful lifestyle.
It sounds like there's something for everyone in the Spanish real estate market. But like with any investment, doing your research, assessing those risks, and making smart decisions is key.
Absolutely. Don't just jump in without understanding what you're getting into. Talk to real estate professionals, get good advice, and make sure your investment matches your goals and how much risk you're willing to take.
So blend your head and your heart. Balance those desires with some good financial planning. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. That cultural immersion that comes with owning property in Spain.
Yes, that's the heart of the experience.
Exactly. It's not just about owning a building. It's about a way of life, a culture, a community.
Owning property in Spain opens the door to a world of cultural richness, those vibrant festivals and traditions, the incredible food, the warm hospitality of the Spanish people.
It's those long evenings with tapas and friends, the smell of fresh bread, that flamenco music in the air.
You get it. It's about really immersing yourself, discovering hidden places, and creating memories that last. It's a deeper connection to the country.
Sounds like a whole new way of life. So, for our listener who's dreaming of that piece of Spanish paradise, what's the most important thing to remember on this journey?
Dream big, absolutely, but plan wisely. Do your research, get good advice, Understand the financial and legal side of things, and most importantly, embrace the culture that's waiting for you. Owning property in Spain can be truly rewarding, both financially and personally, as long as you approach it with careful thought and an open mind.
That's a great way to put it. I think that just about wraps up our deep dive into Spanish real estate and those oh so important taxes. Hope you found it helpful and maybe even a little inspiring.
Me-
And remember, if you're thinking about buying property in Spain, do your homework, find those experts to help you, and enjoy the ride. Until next time, hasta luego. It really does sound like owning property in Spain is more than just a transaction. It's a cultural experience, a lifestyle change. But let's be practical for a moment. We can't ignore the financial side completely. So let's talk about that potential for investment growth. What's your take on the current Spanish real estate market? Is it a good time to invest?
You're absolutely right. We need to balance those dreamy Spanish vibes with a good understanding of the market realities. Overall, Spain's real estate market has seen its ups and downs, but generally it's considered a stable and attractive market for those looking to invest. Of course, like with any investment, there are risks and rewards to carefully consider.
So no guarantees, but a decent track record.
I'd say that's a fair assessment. Things like the location, the type of property, the market conditions at the time, all of those play a role in determining how much an investment might grow.
Location, 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 right? We've all heard that before. Are there any specific regions or types of properties that are particularly hot right now?
Coastal areas, especially those with strong tourism appeal, those picture-perfect beaches, they tend to be popular with investors. And then, of course, cities like Barcelona, Madrid, Valencia, those also attract a lot of investment because of their vibrant economies and cultural scenes.
So whether it's a beachfront escape or that bustling city life, Spain seems to have it all. What about the types of properties? Are we mainly talking about traditional homes, or are there some unique niches gaining traction?
Traditional homes are always going to be in demand. But you're right, there's a rise in these niche markets too. Holiday rentals are booming, fueled by that tourism we mentioned. Retirement homes are another area seeing growth. Spain is quite appealing for retirees. And even rural properties. For those seeking a quieter, slower pace of life, those are becoming more sought after as well.
It's interesting how the real estate market reflects broader trends, like remote work and the desire for a more balanced life. But with all this variety, it must be a bit overwhelming for someone just starting to explore Spanish real estate. What advice would you give someone just dipping their toes in?
My advice would be, don't just jump in head first. It's easy to get caught up in the romance of Spain, but making informed decisions is key. Research, thorough research, is absolutely essential. Consult with real estate professionals who understand the local market, those intricacies, and very importantly, make sure any investment aligns with your personal financial goals and your risk tolerance.
So it's about balancing the heart and the head, those emotional pulls, with some smart financial planning. Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to those intangible rewards that we talked about earlier. Beyond the numbers, what makes owning property in Spain so special?
That's the magic of it, isn't it? It's not just about owning a piece of property, it's about owning a piece of a vibrant culture. Spain offers such incredible richness, from those lively festivals and deeply rooted traditions to the fantastic cuisine and the warm hospitality of the Spanish people.
I can practically hear the flamenco guitar and smell the paella now. It's about sharing tapas with new friends, the aroma of fresh bread from local bakeries, experiencing that rhythm of life that's so uniquely Spanish.
You've got it. It's about immersing yourself in the culture, discovering those hidden gems, building memories that go beyond a simple vacation. Owning property provides a deeper connection to this beautiful country.
It truly sounds like a lifestyle shift, more than just a change of scenery. So for our listener who's dreaming of that slice of Spanish paradise, what's the most important thing to keep in mind during this whole process?
Dream big, of course, but plan wisely. Knowledge is key, so do your research. Get advice from the experts, especially when it comes to taxes and legalities, to avoid those potential pitfalls. And most of all, embrace the cultural richness that's waiting for you. Owning property in Spain can be such a rewarding experience, both financially and personally, as long as you approach it thoughtfully and with an open mind.
Beautifully put. Well, I think we've covered it all. The ins and outs of Spanish real estate taxes, the allure of the lifestyle, and the importance of informed decisions. It's been a fantastic deep dive.
I completely agree. It's been a pleasure sharing these insights.
And for anyone dreaming of those Spanish sunsets and a life filled with that Iberian charm, remember, do your research, find those experts to guide you, and most importantly, enjoy every step of this journey. Until next time, adios.